Welcome to Dark 10. Today, we're going to go over 10 unbelievable things people have actually been arrested and thrown in jail for. Make sure to watch until number 1, because it's one of the most creepiest stories I've ever read. Number 1. Possession of Spaghettios. Ashley Huff's story started innocently enough. When police in Gainesville, Georgia, pulled the vehicle over for a routine traffic inspection, the 23-year-old was in the passenger seat. As cops searched Huff's pocket, they discovered a spoon coated in an unknown substance. Huff clarified that it was filthy because she had just finished eating Spaghettios and had put the dirty spoon in a bag to give to a friend. Officers suspected it was methamphetamine and performed a field test, which came back positive, according to reports. Huff was charged with methamphetamine possession and spent 2 weeks in jail before being released. In August, Huff was remanded in custody for a month and a half, pending the outcome of more detailed lab tests on her spoon. They discovered that she had just been in possession of Spaghettios sauce the whole time. Number 2. Not wearing a seatbelt. Gail Atwater was pulled over by police in Lago Vista, Texas, in 1997, in a case that would eventually be determined by the Supreme Court. She and her 2 children were not wearing seatbelts, which the officer noted. Instead of issuing a citation, the officer arrested Atwater and took her to the local police station, where she remained in custody for about an hour before posting bail. At the conclusion of the ordeal, Atwater pleaded no contest to the seat belt violation and paid the maximum fine of $50. The Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision in 2001 that the Fourth Amendment would not prohibit a warrantless arrest for a minor criminal offense punished only by a fine. Perhaps the "click it or ticket" campaign needs a more terrifying slogan. Number 3. Littering. A police officer in Albuquerque, New Mexico, apparently saw Brandon Ambergy's flicking of a lit cigarette into the middle of a busy street as an act worthy of arresting the 31-year-old. Ambergy was arrested and taken to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where he was given the option of posting cash bail or bond, or being released on the condition of appearing in a mental health court. Ambergy, on the other hand, chose not to pursue these options and stayed in prison for almost a week before being released on bail. According to a follow-up article by KRQE, Albuquerque police have arrested at least 7 people for littering since 2012. According to KRQE, the majority of them, including Ambergy, had drug abuse or mental health problems. Number 4. Jaywalking. Scott Miller was rushing across the street in Oregon in 2010 when a police officer realized he hadn't used a crosswalk. Miller was pursued by the cop, who approached him. According to court documents obtained by Oregon Live, the officer then took Miller to the ground, handcuffed him, and informed him that he was under arrest. Miller was issued a summons for jaywalking and released after being detained at the precinct for about 30 minutes. Miller's civil rights were not violated. According to a later complaint, even T. Huff the cop had no power under state law to detain him for jaywalking. Even though a jaywalking summons does not result in an individual being arrested, Radley Balco of the Washington Post has reported how simple tickets for minor infractions often result in later arrests and prison time because recipients are unable to pay fines. This activity has been compared to a modern-day debtor's prison by critics. Number 5. Having homemade soap. Last year, Annadelle Cruz, 26, and Alexander Bernstein, 30, were arrested in Pennsylvania on drug trafficking charges after police officers refused to believe that 2 bars of homemade soap in her car were not really cocaine. Troopers said they smelled marijuana in the vehicle after pulling it over in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. According to the Morning Call, Cruz confessed to smoking earlier in the day. When officers discovered the soap in the car, they checked it and found it to be positive, according to Lehigh Valley Live. The pair spent the next month in prison, unable to post bail of $500,000 for Bernstein and $250,000 for Cruz. After a state lab found no evidence of illegal drugs, the charges were finally dismissed. After this, everybody should pause about jumping to conclusions when a field test is said to be positive by law enforcement, a lawyer for Cruz later told Morning Call. These field experiments have resulted in people being jailed with large bail amounts. Number 6. Profanity. Wesley Force of New Bern, North Carolina, learned last year that not all speech is free when he was arrested and taken to prison for saying the word "fuck" in public. Force was finally released without bail, but when he appeared in court the next month, a judge sentenced him to 10 days in prison. He was required to complete his sentence at home while being monitored by an electronic system. These types of arrests are uncommon, though not unheard of. Earlier this year, a woman was arrested in South Carolina for cursing in front of her children at a supermarket. Number 7. Spitting on the ground. Another popular action that, depending on where you are, can get you detained and imprisoned, at least temporarily. Last year, while walking around his Florida neighborhood, Joseph Stoiber was approached by a police officer in yet another ludicrous incident. The officer was suspicious of what was in Stoiber's pocket about 2 a.m., according to the Ledger. The cop requested Stoiber's permission to search him, but Stoiber declined. According to the Ledger, the officer began patting Stoiber down anyway, and Stoiber spat on the ground because he had chewing tobacco in his mouth. Stoiber was arrested and booked into prison, where he was later released on a $250 bond. For the pat-down and brutality during their confrontation, the arresting officer and another officer who arrived later were subsequently suspended. Number 8. Farting. In 2012, school systems in Meridian, Mississippi, came under fire for overseeing a school-to-prison pipeline, in which children were routinely sent to juvenile detention facilities for minor infractions, according to the Justice Department. The Justice Department explained that several students have been imprisoned for items including dress code breaches, flatulence, profanity, and contempt, in a letter announcing the results of a federal inquiry. In 2008, a 13-year-old Florida student was arrested and taken to the police station after farting and turning off other students' computers during class. He was charged with disrupting school operations and then released to his mother's care. Number 9. Possession of Jolly Ranchers. After discovering some crystalline rocks of solid stone on Love Olatunjioho and 2 other suspects in 2013, a New York City police officer who had presumably been watching a little too much Breaking Bad arrested them and charged them with drug possession. Olatunjioho said they were still wrapped Jolly Ranchers, but the officer suspected them of being meth. A field test was allegedly conducted and the results were positive, prompting Olatunjioho and his companions to be detained for 24 hours. The suspects were released after further lab tests came back negative. Following that, the 3 filed a case against the NYPD, which was settled for $33,000 last month. Number 10. Loitering. For decades, police have used loitering arrests to punish homeless people for activity that has since been shown to be perfectly legitimate. In 2012, New York City attempted to make amends by providing a $15 million payout to the 22,000 people who had been charged with loitering in the previous 20 years. Although a charge of loitering may seem absurd and meaningless, many of these offenders spent time in prison as a result of their crimes. Some were imprisoned because they couldn't afford bail, and others were held because they didn't show up for subsequent court hearings after the original loitering detention. In one well-known case from the 1980s in Florida, a man was sentenced to 13 months in prison after being arrested for loitering alone. Subscribe Dark 10 and turn on notifications so you don't miss more videos of creepy, interesting, or scary facts and much more. Check out this playlist of my Dark 10 videos of crime and killers and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.